The world is shifting again. Not slowly, not quietly, but through the same invisible rhythm that has guided every great transformation in history. Most people don't see it yet. Because when change first begins, it hides in plain sight. It begins with headlines that seem temporary, financial policies that feel like quick fixes, and conflicts that appear isolated. But if you zoom out, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Every few generations, the global system resets. Empires rise, dominate, and then decline, replaced by new powers that repeat the cycle under different names. It's not speculation. It's a pattern as old as civilization itself. Over the last 500 years, 3 empires have ruled the world in succession: the Dutch, the British, and the American. Each built its power on the same foundation: innovation, trade, a strong military, and a currency trusted around the globe. Each reached astonishing heights, and each eventually fell, not because of one fatal mistake, but through a gradual erosion of discipline, competitiveness, and unity. Today, the United States stands where the others once stood, at the late stage of its own cycle. The signs are everywhere: rising debt, internal division, declining trust in institutions, and an emerging global rival, China. To understand what's coming, we have to understand how this cycle works. Because history doesn't just repeat, it rhymes in the language of economics, power, and human nature. The modern version of this story begins in 1971, when President Richard Nixon made an announcement that quietly redefined the world economy. At the time, the United States was the unquestioned superpower. Its dollar was backed by gold, and its military influence stretched across the planet. But beneath the surface, cracks had already begun to form. The US was spending far more than it earned. The Vietnam War, social programs, and foreign commitments drained its reserves. Foreign governments, holding mountains of US dollars, began demanding gold in exchange, as promised under the Bretton Woods Agreement. But there wasn't enough gold left to cover the paper promises. So, on an August evening, Nixon appeared on television and declared that the dollar would no longer be convertible into gold. The world changed that night. Money, for the first time in modern history, became an idea, backed not by metal, but by trust. At first, markets panicked. Then, surprisingly, they surged. Stocks rose, gold soared, commodities spiked. What seemed like a crisis turned into a boom. People felt richer, but the truth was, nothing real had changed. Only the illusion of value had expanded. That moment revealed a deeper principle that still governs our world today. When governments print more money than the economy produces in real wealth, the value of that money falls. And when money loses value, the prices of everything else rise. It's the same principle that played out in 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt ended the gold standard during the Great Depression. And it happened again in 2008, when the US Federal Reserve printed trillions to save the banking system. It happened in 2020 when the pandemic shut down the world and governments printed money to prevent total collapse. Every time, the short-term relief feels good. The long-term consequences are harder to see. Inflation, asset bubbles, and a widening gap between those who own assets and those who live paycheck to paycheck. That widening gap is not just an economic issue. It is the trigger for the next stage of the cycle: social conflict. When prosperity is concentrated in the hands of the few, resentment begins to grow. The middle class starts to shrink. Politics becomes polarized. The left calls for redistribution. The right defends private wealth. Trust in leadership breaks down, and the idea of unity feels outdated. This is the stage every empire enters before its decline. The same tension that tore at the Dutch Republic in the 1700s, the British Empire before World War I, and now the American-led world order. At the same time, a new power always rises. For the United States, that rival is China. Over the last 4 decades, China has gone from poverty to becoming the world's manufacturing hub and technological challenger. Its cities have risen from dust. Its economy has grown to rival the United States, and it's building global alliances across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, the same regions where Western influence once ruled. But China's rise is not just economic. It's strategic. It's digital. It's ideological. It's building a different vision of order, one that challenges the Western definition of democracy, currency, and control. The world is now in the overlap, the dangerous transition between an old power and a new one. This period, history shows, is always turbulent. It's marked by financial instability, political populism, and geopolitical rivalry. The last time it happened, the world entered the Great Depression, followed by World War II. Before that, it was the fall of the British Empire and the rise of the United States. Before that, the Dutch gave way to the British. Each time the transition took decades, and each time it felt to the people living through it like the end of the world as they knew it. The cycle begins after a major conflict, a war, a revolution, or an economic collapse. The victors build new systems, new alliances, and new currencies. Peace follows. Prosperity returns. Innovation accelerates. Trade expands. The empire grows confident. People borrow. Markets boom. Wealth multiplies. And slowly, the focus shifts from hard work and discipline to comfort and consumption. Values change. Luxury replaces sacrifice. Borrowing replaces saving. Then, the unthinkable happens. The empire begins to rot from within. Debt piles up. Productivity slows down. The cost of maintaining power, both military and social, exceeds the income it brings in. The empire begins to finance its stability with borrowed money. And the longer it continues, the weaker it becomes. It's a story told not in speeches, but in numbers. Trillion-dollar deficits, rising inflation, collapsing birth rates, and declining faith in the future. But the fall never begins with chaos. It begins with denial. The people at the top insist everything is fine. The system adjusts. Markets recover. Life goes on. Until one day something small, a war, a pandemic, a financial panic, exposes how fragile it all really is. That's where we are today. Global debt is at record levels. Nations are printing money again to cover deficits. The cost of living is rising faster than wages. Political polarization is deepening. And two great powers, the US and China, are quietly preparing for a test of dominance that could reshape the 21st century. Yet in every collapse lies renewal. Every empire that fell gave birth to something new, often stronger, more adaptive, more aligned with the realities of its time. The question is not whether change is coming. It's already here. The real question is, who will adapt and who will cling to the old order? When an empire reaches its peak, it doesn't collapse overnight. It drifts, quietly at first, then violently when pressure builds beyond control. The signs of decline appear long before the fall. Productivity slows. The debt grows faster than the economy. The cost of living rises while wages stagnate. The younger generation feels that the system is rigged against them, and those who benefited most from the old order fight to preserve it, even as it decays beneath their feet. Every empire goes through this stage, the illusion of stability before the reckoning. The Dutch felt it when their trade routes became too expensive to defend. The British felt it when their colonies started demanding independence. And today, the United States feels it through the exhaustion of global leadership, endless foreign spending, and political paralysis at home. The strength of an empire has never been measured just by its military or GDP. It's measured by something far deeper: the unity of its people, the trust in its institutions, and the shared belief that the system still works. Once that belief cracks, power begins to leak from within. The decline begins quietly, with money. Throughout history, the most powerful nations have used their currencies as weapons and as privileges. The Dutch had the guilder. The British had the pound. The Americans have the dollar. Each of these currencies became the world's reserve, trusted globally for trade, lending, and storage of value. But with that privilege comes a dangerous temptation: the ability to print wealth instead of earning it. The more the empire prints, the more it lives on borrowed time. At first, it feels harmless. More money means more spending, more jobs, more growth. But eventually, reality catches up. Prices rise, savings lose value, foreign nations lose faith. And slowly, the world begins searching for alternatives. Today, that search has begun again. Nations once dependent on the dollar are building new trade systems, stockpiling gold, and experimenting with digital currencies. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is creating new financial networks designed to bypass the dollar entirely. The reason is simple. Power follows trust, and trust is shifting east. Meanwhile, inside the United States, the divides grow deeper. The political center, the balance that once anchored the nation, has all but disappeared. On one side are calls for radical redistribution. On the other are demands to protect what remains. This is not just politics. It's the symptom of a society losing its shared story. The poor blame the rich fear the poor. Institutions, from Congress to media to universities, are no longer seen as neutral, but as partisan. In that environment, every crisis becomes ammunition, and every disagreement becomes existential. These are the same patterns that preceded the French Revolution, the fall of the British aristocracy, and the collapse of countless dynasties. When the gap between the haves and have-nots becomes too wide to bridge, history resets the system, peacefully or through conflict. But the cracks aren't just social or economic, they're global. Around the world, new alliances are forming. The United States still holds immense power, military, cultural, and technological, but its dominance is being challenged on multiple fronts. China is building influence through infrastructure and investment, rather than invasion. Its Belt and Road Initiative has connected over 150 countries in trade networks that now rival Western influence. Russia, though weakened by sanctions and war, continues to reassert itself as a disruptor. Meanwhile, nations like India, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Indonesia are refusing to choose sides. They're carving out their own paths, playing both powers for advantage. This multipolar world, one without a single dominant power, is what comes next after every empire's peak. The Roman Empire gave way to fragmented kingdoms. The British Empire gave way to an American-led world. And now, the American era is giving way to something more decentralized. A network of competing powers, each armed with technology, nuclear deterrence, and economic leverage. Technology itself accelerates this transformation. The world's most powerful weapon is no longer the aircraft carrier or the nuclear bomb. It's information. It's data, it's artificial intelligence. The next global order will be defined by who controls algorithms, energy, and access to truth. In past centuries, dominance was measured in land and ships. Today, it's measured in silicon and code. Nations that control semiconductor production, quantum computing, and cyber infrastructure will determine the next century's hierarchy. That's why the US and China are racing to control chip manufacturing, rare earth minerals, and AI development. Because whoever leads there will shape the flow of money, power, and influence for decades to come. The next frontier of conflict won, to just be fought on battlefields. It will be invisible. Cyber wars, misinformation campaigns, and economic sanctions disguised as diplomacy. Power is shifting from guns to systems, from who can destroy faster to who can manipulate smarter. And yet, while technology advances, human nature doesn't change. The same emotions that drove the fall of past empires still drive us now. Greed, fear, pride, and denial. The belief that this time is different blinds every generation to the repeating pattern. But history never lies. When money is printed faster than real value is created, inflation rises. When debt grows faster than productivity, collapse follows. When social trust erodes, populism emerges. When a rising power challenges an established one, war, economic or military, becomes inevitable. Today, these four forces are converging at once. Debt has exploded to historic levels across nations. Inflation has returned, eroding savings and confidence. Populism is dividing societies from Washington to Paris to São Paulo. And US-China tensions are intensifying over trade, technology, and territory. The same ingredients that existed before the major world resets of the past are now present again. But decline doesn't always mean destruction. Some nations reinvent themselves before the collapse completes. Japan did it after World War II. Germany did it. Even China, after the chaos of the Cultural Revolution, transformed through reform and pragmatism. The difference between collapse and renewal is leadership. The willingness to face hard truths before they become impossible to fix. For the United States and the Western world, that means rediscovering the principles that built strength in the first place. Productivity over printing, innovation over bureaucracy, unity over division. Because the fall of an empire is never about external enemies. It's always about internal decay. The enemy is not a rival nation. It's apathy, arrogance, and forgetfulness. It's the loss of self-discipline that turns wealth into debt and freedom into chaos. And while the empire weakens, the next one prepares. China's rise is not guaranteed, but its trajectory is undeniable. It invests heavily in technology, education, and global trade. It's expanding its military reach in the Pacific, deepening ties with resource-rich nations, and creating financial systems independent of the West. But it too carries the same vulnerabilities: debt, demographic decline, and growing social tension. The truth is, every empire believes it will be the exception. Every empire believes it can rewrite the pattern. But the rhythm of history always catches up. The world doesn't end when an empire falls. It simply reorganizes. Power doesn't disappear. It migrates. Influence doesn't vanish. It changes form. What we're witnessing now is not the destruction of civilization, but its renewal. The painful but necessary shifting of balance from one dominant order to the next. And in that shifting lies both danger and opportunity. Those who see the pattern early can adapt. Those who cling to nostalgia are crushed by it. The world is entering its next chapter, uncertain, unstable, but full of possibility. The question is no longer who holds power, but who can use it wisely in a world that refuses to stand still. A reset is not a prophecy of ruin. It's a fork in the road. One path follows denial, more leverage, more noise, and a slow slide into fragility. The other path is harder at first and better in the end. It asks for clarity, discipline, and cooperation in a time that rewards outrage. It demands that we rebuild the fundamentals that make any nation, business, or family resilient. Produce more than we consume, invest more than we spend, and treat one another like long-term partners rather than short-term opponents. Start with money, because money touches everything. When prices rise faster than paychecks, people lose faith in the future. When budgets are balanced by printing, not producing, the bill returns later with interest. The only durable cure for inflation is productivity. More energy produced efficiently, more goods made with fewer inputs, more services delivered by smarter systems, more ideas converted into real output. That is not the work of central banks. That is the work of engineers, builders, entrepreneurs, teachers, and well-governed institutions that let them flourish. The next era will be defined by productivity breakthroughs. Artificial intelligence is no longer a novelty. It is quickly becoming infrastructure. Nations that deploy it to modernize logistics, accelerate drug discovery, automate bureaucratic backlog, transform education, and harden critical infrastructure will widen the gap. Nations that restrict it to slogans or fear will fall behind. The moral is simple. Align incentives so that innovation flows into the real economy, not only into speculation. Reward building. Penalize waste. Reduce friction where it stifles creation. Enforce standards where failure would be catastrophic. Energy sits at the center of this puzzle. Every empire rode an energy revolution. Wind and ships for the Dutch, coal and steam for the British, oil and electricity for the American century. The next order will be written by those who secure abundant, reliable, and clean energy at scale. That means diversified grids, upgraded transmission, advanced nuclear, better storage, smarter demand, and supply chains that are resilient to shocks. It also means being honest. Transitions are messy, physics don't negotiate, and ideology does not power hospitals. The countries that treat energy policy as national strategy, not partisan theater, will compound strength year after year. Security now spans domains that once seemed separate. Borders matter, but so do cables under the sea, satellites in orbit, chips on wafers, code in repositories, and rare minerals in distant soils. Supply chains must be both global and redundant, open where possible and domestic where necessary. This is not isolation. It is intelligent interdependence. Build with allies. Keep strategic depth. Expect disruption as normal, not exceptional. The social fabric will determine whether any of this works. When a society can disagree without destroying itself, It compounds advantages that no rival can copy. That begins with trust. Trust is not built by perfection. It is built by transparency, competence, and fair rules that apply to everyone. Corruption corrodes from the top. Contempt corrodes from the bottom. Replace both with a culture that celebrates contribution over identity, responsibility over grievance, and truth over clickbait. Teach the next generation to read data, to test claims, to tell signal from noise. Teach them history not to worship the past, but to recognize the pattern and choose better. For leaders in government, the playbook is not mysterious, just difficult. Balance budgets over the cycle. Borrow for productive investment, not for permanent consumption. Set simple, stable rules that encourage building, housing, energy, infrastructure, and productive businesses. Protect property rights and the rule of law. Without them, capital flees and talent follows. Fund basic research and world-class education with an emphasis on mastery, not credentials. Modernize the state itself. Digitize services. Measure outcomes. Sunset programs that fail. Scale those that work. Compete hard, partner widely, and keep deterrence credible so that competition stays short of catastrophe. For businesses, resilience means optionality. Diversify customers, suppliers, and funding. Hold enough liquidity to survive a sudden stop. Invest in automation that increases output per employee, and in training that turns employees into builders of the system, not just users of it. Protect data like you protect cash. Assume every critical dependency will fail at the worst time, and plan accordingly. For individuals and families, strategy is as old as prudence. Live a little below your means so that compounding can work. Accumulate skills that travel across industries and borders. Diversify savings across cash-flowing assets, productive equities, and real stores of value that do not vanish when currencies wobble. Avoid leverage that relies on perfect conditions. Choose communities that reward good character. In turbulent times, character is an asset class.